Welcome, everybody. I am Loretta Depke, and I'm lucky enough to be the executive director here at the Starting Point. I am with Ken Goldberg, a clinical psychologist with 47 years of professional experience at the Starting Point. He has been here since 2013. And we are talking, and I'm very excited to be talking about part three of the Starting Point's three-part series on intimacy and long-term relationships. The reason for part four is that when Ken and I talked, we agreed that we missed some things. So Ken is going to answer some more questions, and I hope all of you will find this helpful. Ken focuses in his practice on health instead of pathology to help clients chart meaningful and satisfying lives. He is a senior citizen himself who is strongly committed to helping people enjoy the benefits of senior intimacy in their advancing years. So Ken, we agreed that we really missed a big ball of wax, and that was talking about positive role models in the other three parts of this series. You want to talk about what are positive models for us?
Sure. Just to emphasize the need for this fourth meeting after a three-part series. Anne Marie and I did the three-part series, and we're both therapists. And as therapists, we're used to meeting people with problems. And, at times the problems are in their relationship, at times the problems are sexual. And so we focused a lot on what we do to help people correct their problems. But the missing piece is really that nobody really, it seems to me that we have very little information about what a good, long-term, healthy, continuous, from the beginning to the end, sexual intimate relationship looks like. We don't really know about it. We will hear from friends if they're unhappy with their lives and they may share details about it. We could watch movies, television shows. Certainly a happy, terrific relationship is not a good, doesn't lend to a good plot. If you want to see a television series or a movie, conflict is always more interesting in media. So we don't see that, and we don't see if we have friends or relatives that have really good relationships, we may sense it, but we don't really know what goes on in there. I was sharing with you before that to draw an analogy between, we set up a home together and then we live life together. So sex is part of our lives, but the environment we live in is part of our lives. Well, when we set that home up, maybe we watch HGTV and get some ideas about home decorating. There's tons of magazines out there, home and garden, whatever, that show you, give ideas to set up your home. And when we go visit people, we visit our relatives, our friends, we walk into their houses. They're not private about what their house looks like. In fact, they're proud of it. They set it up and you look at it and you may see something about how people set up their home, and it gives you ideas. And then you carve out your own unique decisions about what your environment is going to look like following your tastes and so forth. But you have lots of models to come to look at to figure out what you want to do with your environment. Well, when it comes to your sex life, I mean, when we first, become aware of sexuality, we don't know what we're doing. We have very little information. We might have had some talks from our parents. We might have had some sex education. We might have observed the way our parents' relationships look like from the outside, but we don't really know how it evolved over time to have a satisfying sexual relationship. We're not even sure if anybody has it. We don't really know. And yet how to direct decorate your home, the models are public. But what to do in the bedroom with someone whom you've committed to be your long-term partner, we don't really have those models. And just to add, it's something I've noticed as a therapist and has concerned me. But I also I came across a book called Magnificent Sex: Lessons for Extraordinary Lovers. It's by Peggy Kleinplatz, and I got this book because it seemed to resonate with what I was thinking. And she's a sex therapist, and she essentially had the same idea I had, which is that something was missing just dealing with pathology. So she ended up finding what she called magnificent lovers. I don't know how she found them, but she found some people who evidently had really good sexual experiences and were willing to talk about it. And she went through some interviews. She calls it research. I guess she asks a very clear set of questions and she gives quotes from these people and she comes up with information about what actually happens for people that truly enjoy their sex lives and who are able to maintain a long-term monogamous relationship. She doesn't limit it to monogamous relationships. She does, accept that some people are happy with this polyamorous relationships. But in terms of what I'm talking about, in terms of long-term monogamous relationships, she sort of highlights it's actually one of the first places that I've actually other than maybe looking at my own personal life experiences and culling from things that people have told me and some of my continuing education courses, is really one of the most direct sources I've come across that talks about what does a good long-term intimate sexual relationship look like.
Well, you just used two words that I think we need to understand the difference of, Ken, and that is intimacy and sex. You want to talk about how they relate to each other, or are they different?
Well, and yes, and I've heard people, older people, say to me, "Well, we don't have sex, but we have a very intimate relationship," and they think of it as they kind of accept the idea, which is in many ways a false idea, that you get older and you stop having sex. So with those, they focus on the intimacy. To me, it's a false distinction because to me, they're two different. They're in two different categories. Sex is a behavior. Sex is something you and another person do with each other. Intimacy is a feeling and experience. It's a sense of connection and closeness that you experience to another human being. And when we marry or we get into a long-term relationship without marriage, but when we commit ourselves to a monogamous relationship, we're sort of saying, here is a person among all the people I may care for and love, maybe lots of people you love, but this is a person that I'm going to know on a very, very close level, and I'm going to have an intimate experience. I'm going to feel bonded to this person. There's going to be a level of openness and self-revelation and understanding that does exceed what I have with other people. And then sex is behavior. We're going to engage physically to attend to each other's feelings and satisfy them. And to me, intimacy breeds desires to be physically close and sexual. And sexuality just keeps ratcheting up the sense of intimacy. I mean, I don't talk a lot about my personal experience, nor do I want to reveal much I mean, in terms of, the therapist. But the reality is my experience is that both sex and intimacy just keep growing over my long-term relationship. And I would never say, that any of that gets worse as it goes on. It just gets better because they keep fueling each other.
I think that's an important distinction. They fuel each other. I like the way you explain that. Okay, so Why is it easier then when we're sitting here talking about positive relations? You're out with a group of friends. The women are complaining about the men. The men are complaining about the women. Um, why isn't it just easier to talk about how our partners are making us happy?
Um, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I know that I think back to a particular time when my wife and I had, I think it was four of the couples over for, like a barbecue. This was a number of years ago. And three of the couples just seemed to be cutting each other down. They just got into this negative banter with each other. And my wife and I and another couple just sat there quietly. And, it's like you hear these people are complaining each other, and it's not like you want to just jump in and say, "Oh, but let me tell you about us." We're really happy. So I knew that we were different. The other couple that didn't say anything, I kind of presumed that they had a positive feelings with each other, but I don't really know what goes on in their lives. But the people who were vocal, who were funny, who were cutting, who were bantering. It's all those other people. Now, in terms of talking about sexual experiences, my sense is, and this may not be universally true, that women tend to be more open with their female friends about what's actually happening. Whether one woman is having a lot of problems, the other one wants to say we're doing great. I don't know. But I think women tend to, as they become mature adults, talk about it more. Men tend to not get out of the locker room. So that kind of joking banter of insecure teenage boys that goes on. My experience is that men don't get uh, past that. Um, and and then even if you do get past it and you say something about your relationship, they don't go into details. So I know I play tennis at a racket club, and sometimes we'll get together afterwards, and it's all older men. And a couple of the guys say, they're referring to sex, that's in the past, So I know that's not part of their lives. I mean, they may be very happy, I don't know, but we just don't talk to each other about what actually happens.
I find that fascinating being on the other side, women. And from your perspective, I find it interesting that you think women talk about those details. I would argue that when they're young, they do, but as they age, they shut down, or the longer they're married, they don't have those conversations.
Okay. Well,
But
I defer to your expertise in female psychology because
there you go.
I'm just culling, information from a few things I've heard. I don't really know.
It's
Yeah.
funny. Uh, okay, so tell me, are relationships work?
Well, I say light work, you know. It's like, and I know for a lot of people it's heavy work. There was a very close friend of ours, couple that we know, and I remember the woman said to my wife one time, all couples argue, and she was like feeling. Well, we don't really argue, but she just made that very blanket statement. And I know they argue because anytime we've gotten together, you hear them arguing. But, for some people, it feels like heavy work. And I think the reason it's so heavy is because they're too focused on trying to be right and not focused enough on hearing where their partner is. You know, uh, we've had I mean, over 44 years, my wife and I have had a handful or maybe two handfuls worth of very serious conversations that related to sexuality. But otherwise, and other aspects of the relationship, but it's few. It's very few, and it does require some work. It does require conversation, but I would call it like light housekeeping. I wouldn't call it like, heavy heavy grunt work. I was telling you before there was a seminal moment that I consider in our relationship. And I think this is inevitable. I think when you're in a relationship, you start out and there's a passion. Some people call it the honeymoon phase, where differences between you get masked because the passions are taking over. And it is true that inevitably the differences between you as two human beings is going to emerge. And at some point, it's going to hit a point where it becomes important enough to talk about it. And I always feel there was a seminal moment in my relationship where my wife brought up differences. And what we realized was that differences, once you recognize that there are differences, then you know that at different times, what you're not going to be in the same place. You're not going, at some points you're going to be in sync with each other. At other points, your desires, your interests are going to be different. And basically, as I said, I consider it a seminal moment because what we decided was to figure out what to do in these different situations, not not to be frustrated in those situations. So you find different, you explore and you find different ways. And again, as I said, if you came into my home, I'd show you how we decorated. I'm having this conversation. I'm not going to tell you how we decorated our interaction over these years. But it was very important to recognize I need to understand where she's at. She needs to understand where I'm at. We need to jointly not think of it as a conflict, but think, so what are we going to do? What are we going to do if I'm at one place and she's at a different place? If she's at a certain place, I'm in a different place. What's our solution? And you start to look at what are the options? What is your sexual repertoire? What are the things you can consider doing? And how can you be absolutely real and yet focused on, being there for each other?
And how do you juggle in this day and age when we talk about, you have to make sure you're taking care of yourself? Um, when you're in an important relationship, a long-term relationship, how do you make sure that you're taking care of the other person as much as you're taking care of yourself? Or does it not come to that?
Well, for some people, there's a conflict between taking care of oneself and 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 taking care of your partner. And those are the people that we see in therapy. And those are kind of the people that Anna Marie and I were talking about in the first three meetings of our three-part series. But I don't see any contradiction between taking care of self and taking care of your partner. Uh, you can be very real about what you need and very clear, this is what I need and this is what I really want from you. And yet at the same time, you're concerned about the others. I mean, it's not like you have a cast of thousands and you have to be concerned about all of them. That would be very difficult. But you're just talking about two people. And, yes, what I need is real important. And yes, what you need is real important. Uh, uh, I think I've shared with you that my wife had a recent serious health issue. And to me, it's kind of an honor to be able to address her needs. Sometimes she feels bad because she can't do certain things she used to do. I mean, I do a lot of things around the house that I did not do in the past. And I feel honored and I think back to 44 years and all the things she's done for me at different times. So, so the configuration of what we do, just changes because of where we're at. I mean, tomorrow I could be strict. I'm 77 years old. Tomorrow something could happen in my health very suddenly, and then we'd have to figure something out. And hopefully we don't, our children would come in but we really are committed to just the two of us and not needing to bring them in. But it's after many years, it feels like an honor to be able to do more because of her needs. Because it's an experience of her being concerned about my needs.
I love that, Ken, because I think that sometimes we forget that doing things for others that we love can be an honor. And looking at it that way, it's not, can I just say, it's sort of not the way, um, okay, the movies or the conversations that we have among friends. That's not a, people would never use those terms that it's an honor. And I'm sorry for that, because hearing you say that actually brought tears to my eyes. That's a
Mm.
lovely
Yeah.
sentiment.
And it's truly what I feel. It's truly what I feel. And I can't completely undo that my wife wishes she could do more and maybe feels a little badly that she can't. But it's like, I'm so clear that, that but it grows over time. I mean, when we first met, I fell in love with her, but it grows and grows and grows. But it's not at the sacrifice. It's not as if a sexual relationship now gets sacrificed because you become too old for it. You just, you get older and maybe you make some adjustments and things are different, but you never really become too old to be sexually involved. I remember when we did the three-part series, Anna Marie was commenting on intimacy that doesn't have to involve sexuality. And she mentioned some couple she knew had a beautiful relationship, and one of the people was disabled. And I responded, I said, but do you really know because the person's disabled that they're not sexual? How do you know that? And as she said, she doesn't really know it. We make presumptions. We see an old couple, we think they're not active in bed. We see a disabled person, a paraplegic, we assume they're not having a physical relationship. These are false assumptions, and those expectations then cause us to not hold dearly to the fact that we have this intimate physical relationship. You change those expectations, and then you realize, okay, so what are we going to do now? So we're older, we're arthritic, uh, we're having, our sexual parts are not reacting quite the way they used to. A woman may be in menopause, you may not, have the same reaction. The man they find that he's not having erections the way he used to. It's completely irrelevant to having a good sex life. There are possibilities that one's doctor can offer, or you can find to compensate for some of those issues. Uh, and but if your expectation is that's your relationship, then you continue the relationship.
And I hate to say it, Ken, but I think that is the perfect place to end. It really summarizes what we were trying to capture in the three-part series that needed a fourth.
Okay. Well, I'm glad. I'm glad that this elucidates some things that people may not understand. But again, I'm not sure I have the full answer. I would recommend finding this book, Magnificent Sex, by Peggy Kleinpotz, and she's got some second writer, but I think he's like a ghost writer, to help with writing. But in any event, at least she provides some access to people that are uh, claiming to have really satisfying sexual relationships.
And to find that positive modeling that we've been
Yes,
talking about, that's really
right.
great. Well, Ken, I cannot thank you enough. And if we need a part five, you let me know.
Okay,
All
very
right,
good.
have a good one.